Welcome to Cleantech Forward, a Foresight podcast where we explore clean tech customers, capital, and Canada's path to net zero. Tune in to learn more about Canada's most exciting clean tech startups, industry success stories, investor insights, and academic initiatives as we accelerate the growth and impact of clean tech together.
Hello, I'm Jeanette Jackson, CEO of Foresight Canada and your host of Cleantech Forward. Before we jump into our discussion today, I have a bit of housekeeping to do. We are close to wrapping up the second season of the Cleantech Forward podcast, and we thought it would be a good time to check in with our listeners. We're releasing a short listener survey to find out more about you and what you want to hear from us on this podcast. The survey will only take 2 minutes to fill out, and you can find the link to it in the episode description above. Thank you so much. Okay, let's get on with the program. Today, we're continuing our discussion about the efforts to accelerate Canadian clean tech going on across the country. And to do that, we'll be speaking with Heather Stevens, the COO of Emissions Reductions Alberta, or ERA, as they are commonly referred to. Accelerating clean tech can mean many different things. Organizations like Foresight offer acceleration programming, engage in ecosystem building, and work to connect innovators with investors to help them secure funding. We take a whole of ecosystems approach to ensure innovators, industry partners, governments, and academia have a space to collaborate on the solutions that will drive Canada towards net zero. ERA is an organization that focuses on accelerating the commercialization of clean technology solutions by funding and supporting projects aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the region. Heather has been with ERA since its inception in 2009 and has seen the changes the Alberta clean tech landscape has gone through over the past decade. Today, she'll be joining me to discuss those changes, the work ERA has done, and the importance of accelerating clean tech solutions in Canada.
I mean, it seems like a long time ago now, but we have been around since 2009, which is hard to believe. So we're already into our 14th year. And I started out in the finance side of the business and sort of came into the organization as the CFO and just expanded my scope. I think they call it scope creep over time. And now I sort of act as the chief operating officer of the organization, just taking a few more pieces of the business into my area of responsibility.
And what is the mandate of ERA?
Yeah, so we've been around, as I mentioned, since 2009. We work closely with innovators, industry, and government to support Alberta's transition to a net zero future. And what we always say is that we're focused on reducing emissions, but we're also focused on the province's economy. And so we can't do one of those without the other. Our money comes from the carbon price that's paid by the large emitters in the province. Alberta was one of the first jurisdictions in North America to set up such a system, and ERA has been a core delivery partner from the beginning, investing those funds in a diverse range of projects. So we identify and accelerate innovative solutions, but we're focused on that late stage, so things like pilot, demonstration, and first-of-kind scale-up. And our funding is really focused a little bit more on pay for performance. So things like clear objectives set out in advance, milestones, timelines, and deliverables all form part of our funding commitments. And it's also important to point out that a key principle of our funding has always been to ensure that industry money comes alongside ERA funding. And so to date, our funding ratio actually sits at over 7-to-1, meaning for every dollar that ERA is putting in, we're actually getting another $7 by industry and other funding sources. So we spend a lot of time working with other partners in the ecosystem, making sure that people are getting what they need right across that funding continuum. So I'm really pleased to say that over our 14 years, I'm proud to say that we have invested over $900 million to date on 260 projects that are valued at over $7 billion. The cumulative impact of our emission reductions, which is really a big part of the story, is currently projected to be over 40 megatons by 2030 and over 110 when you look out to 2050. And because I always have to say that this is an and story, our impact on the economy is significant. And right now we're estimating that our projects are creating an impact in Alberta's GDP of over $5.4 billion. And that accounts to about 35,000 jobs.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the types of projects and specific projects that you fund?
Yeah, I'd love to. So we always say there's no silver bullet. It's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. And so we need a range of technologies across a range of industries and sectors. And so things like detecting methane emissions from satellites and aircraft in northern Alberta, projects that are producing renewable energy and high quality fertilizer for farmers down in Lethbridge. We're trialing hydrogen fuel cell trains in Calgary and buses in Edmonton. We're also advancing net zero cement production plants. We're reducing waste in landfills, even capturing carbon from a brewery right in the heart of Lacombe. So our portfolio doesn't only represent these diverse technologies, but it also represents a diverse time scale. So we're looking both at immediate reductions, impacts that will have tangible results and quantifiable now. So creating those jobs and emissions that are in place even before the project's completed and will be in place sort of long after it is completed. But then we're also looking out to technologies and projects that can have that truly transformative opportunity. So these reductions are going to take a little longer for us to see and to be delivered, but they can be much more impactful in their long-term reductions. And so one example there is the oil sands recovery technology that uses light hydrocarbons to mobilize bitumen. It has the potential to reduce emissions from oil sands recovery by more than 50%. And since the oil sands industry, as we know, is the largest and fastest growing source of GHGs in Alberta, it has the potential to make a significant impact for us right here in the province. And it can also be said the same for exciting new technologies. So things we might not even know about yet, but their potential is there to create new markets and new economic activity and new jobs. So we understand also that these good ideas can come from anywhere. So things that we don't even know about, we know that they're not going to come just from the borders of Alberta. Climate change is a global problem. We have people working on it all over the world. And so we do also try to reach out to that broad group of innovators, but the benefit to Alberta needs to be really clear. So anything that we do end up funding, we do need to see that direct benefit to how they're going to be deployed and commercialized ultimately in Alberta.
Yeah, I think that makes absolute sense. And it's a perfect segue because you fund these initial projects to get them past the pilot stage. What about supports that ERA may or already provide support for following that stage when they're really looking to scale up?
Yeah, you're bang on, Jeanette. So commercialization is key. I always say we're not really in this just for the project level emission reductions. They're nice and they're tangible and they're immediate, but really the game changer is when all of these technologies are widely commercialized and deployed in the marketplace. And that's really where we're going to see the net benefit and really drive our emissions down. And so there's lots of things that ERA does to support that, but I'll just highlight a couple. So when we did our carbon capture kickstart call, we worked really closely with the International CCUS Knowledge Center, and they're really there to provide support to the 11 projects that we ultimately funded. So they're actually giving up to 200 hours of their time to help with these pre-construction and engineering studies to make sure that we have captured all of the right risks and advantages that are going to be seen from these projects should they move towards final investment decision. And so then building off of this, what we're also doing is convening a CCUS Senior Executive Series focused on getting these projects, the capital P projects, to the final investment decision. And so these efforts are working on gathering information and producing a set of white papers in advance of the GHGGT 17 conference, which is taking place in Calgary in October next year. And if I can just give a quick little plug, ERA is actually co-hosting that conference, and it's a large-scale international event focused on CCS leadership and development. And so it's looking to attract over 1,200 presenters and delegates and exhibitors, and really can demonstrate Alberta's leadership in this space. There's one last thing that we're also undertaking with other partners in our ecosystem right now, and it's a barriers to commercialization study. So we're just in the final stages of the draft report and really looking forward to digging into the recommendations around that. And this study is really going to help inform those strategies going forward to address the relevant gaps and issues which exist in the system that are preventing that successful commercialization and scale up.
Now, you started to highlight some of the work that you're doing behind the scenes as you prepare for the next phase of your organization's strategy. I'm sure there's things, though, you have seen since opening in 2009. Do you mind sharing some of the gaps or barriers or opportunities that you're already aware of in terms of venture scaling and reaching their goals?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Jeanette. And I think, when we look back over our time, I think we would say in the earlier days, there was maybe a bit more silo or people working independently, and that's probably best case scenario. And maybe at worst, there was a little bit of competition in the ecosystem, and that was also confusing for innovators and not understanding which direction they should take their project or where they should look for the right level of support at the right time within their development of their project. And so I would say, what we need to do is prioritize as a system the technology gaps and work together. And one of the examples that I might highlight is a few years ago, this is going back a little while now, but we did do a joint call with Sustainable Development Technology Canada. And it really paved the way for ERA to develop what is now called our Partnership Intake Program. And this was really, it's sort of a really fundamental program to how we operate now, and allows projects to come to us as they are developed, and it's sort of a continuous intake model. And it was the first time that we had done this. And it also helped pave the way for SDTC to start working with other provincial organizations around Canada as well. And so it really kind of demonstrates the leadership that the organizations had, in particular Alberta had at the time, to really think about how do we make this easier for innovators to access what are critical supports that they need.
Building on sort of your intel over the last several years, how are you seeing the rate of deployment of clean tech solutions across the province evolve since ERA and other stakeholders have come in to really influence the needle?
Yeah, I mean, what I can say for us is we see a strong pipeline of projects. All of our calls have been oversubscribed, often multiples of the amount of funding that we have available. And I think what's key is that the role of risk capital is planning for those failures. And it's really important to ensure that we have enough horses in the race. So we need to increase the pick, because that there will be some attrition for various reasons, various barriers. But it's really important that if we're going to get there, that we plan for these failures in advance. And I think the system is getting better at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Patient capital, risk capital, and it's hard to pick winners right out of the gate. For one challenge, there's going to be more than one approach. And so we need to give innovators and adopters the space to navigate which one of those solutions can really take it to the finish line in terms of meeting those emissions targets, and also making the business case make sense, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Canada has historically struggled with domestic adoption for many clean tech products. What is your perspective on how we fare and how we are doing relative to how other countries are doing? And have we adopted some of the same solutions, or do we need to look at adopting some of the other solutions to really accelerate that adoption?
I think you're bang on. We've done a really good job of coming up with great ideas, but we have struggled on the commercialization and really getting them to be widely deployed here in Canada. And I would say it's not necessarily because of a shortage of funds at that earlier stage. I think we have that ability to attract smaller dollars for scientific discovery and proof of concept. But that need for that large capital funding sources for scale up and demonstration and deployment of these first of kind technologies remains a major barrier in Alberta and across Canada. And so that's part of the role that we play, is really providing those funds that help mitigate the technology risk at that scale up, sort of late stage technology development phase. And I think one of the key elements is requiring that industry match. It's really demonstrating that there's a market pull for those technologies. That again helps speak to the de-risking and the, that you're developing technologies and solutions that industry actually needs. And so in Alberta, on the policy front, I think we're doing really well. I think we're further advanced than many. We were the first jurisdiction in Canada to introduce the industrial carbon pricing and emissions trading system back in 2007. And as I mentioned before, one of the first in North America as well. So we have lots of those carrots and sticks in place, and particularly to support CCUS and hydrogen and natural gas development. But even when there is strong regulatory and policy environment, there's a big risk when it comes to that amount of investment needed. And so I think where we can do better is looking forward for a bit more policy clarity in some of those longer term supports. So I know Alberta and Canada are working on a working group at the moment where they're going to work on the emission reduction and energy development. And I think some of the key elements coming out of that working group will be really key for a lot of these projects to understand the economics for their final investment decisions.
When we think about various programs throughout the ecosystem, why are programs like ERA and others that are trying to accelerate the commercialization and deployment of these solutions important for Canada and even the world?
So innovation is not an easy road to travel. And ERA is about identifying and accelerating solutions that reduce GHG and improve our economic competitiveness. But I think what we know is that finding a promising technology is not enough. And the best ideas don't always turn into products or companies that reduce emissions. So to get to that place, you need a sound business model. You need to know who your customer is. You need the right team in place. You need capital. So a great idea is not enough. Government funded support to help de-risk these technologies, to help convene the system, is really critical. Another big piece of the puzzle is knowledge sharing. And so one of the things that we always mandate in our projects is to ensure that we get the word out. We publish our reports publicly. Lots of these are accessed by people working in the system. And it really helps, as you say, the globe in the problems that we're trying to fight. Global climate change does not understand borders, and we are all working on lots of the same solutions for our jurisdictions. So we're going to need it all, and we need all the players at the table.
Now, if I'm a startup, which serial entrepreneur, I may have done a few, if I'm in the space of clean tech and I'm looking to take my business to the next level, what are one or two pieces of advice you would give me? And that can be from your perspective or the perspective of ERA.
I would say choose your partners well. So there's a general perception that the developer needs is capital, but you need the right strategic partners. So people that can work with you through your pilot plant, work with you through your commercialization stage, and really move you to where that technology can be commercialized and widely deployed. And so what does a good partner look like? They probably look like they're flexible and they're resilient and they're collaborative. And because of that, the innovation technology, as we know, it's a fluid and dynamic process. So having those people along with you for the ride are really important. And so that leads right into my second piece of advice, is make sure you have the right people on your team. And so lots of entrepreneurs have great ideas and they're great at many, many things, but also a great skill is to know what they're not good at and ensure that they have complementary skill sets on their team. And so we said it before, but a good idea is not enough. You need to have the complete solution. And so, we have the complete teams, the right partners, working with jurisdictions. And with that, I think we'll go farther and faster.
One of the companies that ERA has supported via funding in several demonstration projects is Carbon Upcycling Technologies. Carbon Upcycling is a waste and carbon utilization company that uses point source carbon capture technology to trap and utilize carbon emissions before they ever enter the atmosphere. Their technology combines the captured CO2 with local industrial byproducts and natural materials to improve the performance of things like cement, plastics, consumer products, fertilizers, and even pharmaceuticals. Joining us today is Ryan Bourns, the Business Strategy Development Manager for Carbon Upcycling. Ryan has been with the company since 2018, just a few years after they initially opened their doors. Here's a bit more about Ryan's background, how the work of organizations like ERA have affected the trajectory of carbon upcycling, and more about how accelerators are changing the clean tech ecosystems in Canada.
I originally grew up in Ontario and always had a passion for sustainability, and was really just looking to find my foot in the door in the industry, and ultimately came about a master's program out in Calgary focused on sustainable energy development. And it was actually through that program that I ended up meeting the co-founder and CEO of Carbon Upcycling Technologies, of course, Sinha. He was giving a presentation, and like every ambitious student, I was hungry for a job, and it really just started a conversation with myself and him. And through that, ended up jumping into things at Carbon Upcycling, and that was a little over 5 years ago. And it's been a great journey to see not only ourselves grow within this industry, but just to see the growth of clean tech in Canada in general.
So Carbon Upcycling, remind us, what year did they kick off, and what exactly do you do?
So the company was founded around 2014, and in large part, the beginning of the company, the genesis of it, has to do with the accelerator and funding ecosystem within Alberta. But I'll get into that later on. To give a bit of a description on Carbon Upcycling, we are, as the name would suggest, we are a carbon tech company. So we're in the world of CCUS, and we're focused on delivering technologies to help decarbonize the hard to abate industries within our world. Our technology, it allows us to permanently store carbon dioxide into industrial byproducts and just ultimately create a high performance alternative for cement and concrete. The aim is not only just to reduce the carbon impact of industrial processes, but also to divert industrial materials from landfills. And truly what we think we're doing here is enabling a circular economy.
Now, Carbon Upcycling, you start from zero and now you're scaling. What clean tech accelerators have you been a part of, whether it's in Canada or globally?
So I would start off by saying we've been incredibly fortunate with the amount of accelerators that we've been part of. We've seen everything from government-led or trade commissioner-led accelerator programs. We've been focused on just ecosystem based accelerators, and then we've also been part of accelerators that are run by corporates. So that would be something like a Repsol did an accelerator out in Spain that we were part of. We were part of the Lafarge-Holcim accelerator back when they were still known as Lafarge-Holcim, and that was way back in 2018. But we have really seen, had a diverse experience within the world of accelerators, and we've been able to target those accelerators to either technical development or how we can get involved from a policy perspective, even, or just how we can immediately integrate with the corporate's sustainability ambitions. So it's been great to have that perspective, and some have certainly been more beneficial than others, and some we have very strong connections with to this day. So we've been very fortunate to be involved in as many as we have been.
Well, hopefully Foresight is one of the ones that you stay connected with as long as possible. Of course, not to be a detractor, but to help. What are some of the challenges that you've seen with different types of accelerators? And are there things that you feel this network of support can be doing better?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that I would mention from our experience is just that these are a time commitment, and you, as the saying goes, you get out of it what you put into it. And as any startup knows, and we have the perspective of a startup in the the hardware or the hard tech in industrial scale industries, there's only so much time that you have in the day and only so many resources that you can spread around. So one of the things that we did learn early on is that we needed to be very targeted with the accelerators and not just jump into something for the sake of jumping into it. So ensuring that there are clear outcomes that have been defined within the accelerator is something that we ask for that. Whenever there is an opportunity, we want to make sure that the accelerator has defined outcomes or has an approach to getting to that point. But ultimately it's essential that the timing aligns with the stage of the company, the industry of the company, and making sure that that expectations have been set appropriately.
Those are great pieces of input that I think all of us can reflect on as we continue to modify and ensure our programming remains as progressive and useful as possible. That being said, what are some of the strengths that you've seen throughout the accelerator network, and what are things that we're all doing well?
So I would say that there's a lot of value just in the making the appropriate connections and growing the network of within certain industries, and making sure that those folks are speaking to one another it is an incredibly helpful aspect of the accelerators that we've been part of, and making sure that especially in the hard to abate industries, that you need buy-in from a variety of stakeholders, and ensuring that there is a pathway to collaboration amongst those different stakeholders is essential. So like I said, even from a policy level, down to the heavy emitting industry partner, to the clean tech startup, all those folks have to be on the same page if we truly want to scale these technologies for industrial decarbonization. So that's an incredibly important component. But there's also targeted incentives within a lot of these accelerators as well. And any startup will say that that's also a nice little carrot to work towards. But really just making the connections to the correct stakeholders and the folks that can make decisions, but also ensuring that the time and resources are commensurate with the outcomes that you're ultimately looking for.
It's funny, I think for us too, I mean, even though we are a supporter of startups, we are a small organization and have to reflect on how we operate. Are we providing the right value, and do we have that product market fit, and all these things? So I find your input, super, super intriguing. Let's pivot to some of the accelerators that come with significant funding opportunities. A huge fan of Emissions Reductions Alberta and the work that Justin and team are now leading there. How has carbon upcycling benefited or, seen some success being supported by an organization like ERA?
Yeah, so I guess I gave a little teaser off the top here that ERA was fundamental in really kickstarting things at carbon upcycling. They had their grand challenge back around that 2014 timeline, and we were able to move forward a couple stages within that and get some very helpful seed funding to kick things off, and that was incredibly helpful. And really, ERA has been a supporter of ours from the early days, from the early TRL days of this technology that we had before we ultimately knew kind of which industry we could actually make an impact in. And they've been there for a few different projects, and we're still participating in some of the programs and challenges that they have put out. So right off the top, they have been incredibly influential and important to the success of carbon upcycling and moving things forward here. And I think one of the great things that they've been doing at ERA is really demonstrating, or I guess proposing challenges that are fit for industry, and making sure that there is an important connection to industrial partners. And I think that has created the appropriate incentive for industrial partners to want to work with folks like us, but also provided enough funding support so that a startup could commit the time and resources towards these scale up projects. So they have been very, very influential and helpful for us to move things forward. And to this day, we still have that strong connection with the ERA team.
Building on sort of your experience one-on-one with accelerators, I perhaps sometimes come to the conclusion that accelerators affect more broader ecosystem opportunity and development as well. Have you seen some examples, or do you think that the network of accelerators has been positive, negative, neutral in developing Canada's clean tech ecosystem?
100%. Yeah, it's again, from the perspective of a startup, there's only so many folks that you'll know as a small company, and so those being able to grow the network, grow the ecosystem is hugely important, just so folks know who to speak to, and getting tapped into those resources and getting your name out there is where those stroke of luck or fate interactions end up happening, and that's where some really interesting and strong partnerships can grow from there. But it's so helpful as a startup to just be able to point to a couple different ecosystems or kind of network connections or connectors, and from that point on say, hey, I need to speak with someone in this industry. Would you happen to know anyone, or do you have any suggestions for someone trying to get involved in this industry? And that really that just saves so much time and so much very desperate time for a lot of startups trying to get their foot in the door with major industries.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. I mean, it takes a village, and I think different organizations working together does create more alignment between those organizations. And are we filling gaps? Are we additive? Are we complementary? And how can you better provide your whole suite of supports and infrastructure, to the stakeholders that you're trying to get to move? As you know, Foresight deals a lot on the innovation side of things, but we also deal a lot on the adoption side of things. And what kind of activator can you be when you're familiar and comfortable working with all the other groups in the ecosystem? Jumping forward, you're familiar with our Carbon Next initiative. It's it has an ambitious goal of reducing 50 megatons of GHG emissions in the next 10 years. It also is a platform that hopefully brings the different CCUS or carbon capture utilization storage companies together and figuring out how they can tackle some of these big climate challenges. Based on the work you're doing, are you starting to see the rate of deployment of these technologies increasing? And if so, is it going at a pace that you've not expected in a good way, or are there things that groups can be doing to help move it forward faster?
So yeah, I guess to start with the first question, the rate of deployment, I would say that it certainly has increased, and it's been exciting to see that the different accelerators, programs, challenges that they themselves have been increasing in scale, because the technology in different industries like CCUS, it continues to grow, and so the incentives around what's required to get to the next level also grow. So I would definitely say that there has been increasing adoption. One little heuristic that I often reflect on is that I used to have to start most of my presentations just outlining the carbon problem and the impact of different industries and why change is necessary, and that's no longer a requirement. It's not something that we need to answer that question first. We can immediately jump into how do we solve these problems. So I think things have become far more solution focused, which is a great start. But I think that's just because there's been more adoption and buy-in to what are the challenges we're facing and what are the solutions we need to be looking for. In terms of whether or not we have seen things, the rate of things go at the speed that we want to, I would still say that there are some major gaps to get to our 2030, our 2040, our 2050 goals. When we talk to a lot of industrial partners, they have a general roadmap, but a lot of question marks within that, and really looking at the gap that needs to be filled between now and 2030. We're talking about major industries that you can think of them as a big boat. They have to start to turn now to get anywhere close to where they want to be in the next few years here. So I think there still are some gaps to be filled, but I think that those gaps are at the further end of the adoption cycle, and it's starting to increase a little bit more of those pull requirements from government procurement perspectives. They're a major player, and they can also help to create additional incentives and clear some roadblocks for clean tech companies to integrate with their respective industries. So yeah, I would say that there still are some needs to get to some of those upcoming targets, but at the very least, it has been good to see that things have been growing within the last few years here.
What's on the horizon next for carbon upcycling?
Well, we've just in the last few months here, we finalized our Series A, which again, fundraising is obviously a very important component of any startup and any hard tech company. And a lot of those connections that we've had have been through accelerators. So just again, another feather in the cap for that need for accelerators. But we are currently working on a few pilot scale projects, one of which funded by or with partial funding from ERA, Rating Calgary, and then two other projects with some cement partners of ours, one located out in Ontario and one over in the UK. So delivering on those is of the utmost importance here, but we're also looking at what that next generation of our reactors looks like. How do we get from the scale that we're at now, which is roughly 50 tons per day, and how do we hit that a scale at which we start to help our cement partners realize their emissions reduction goals? And so we have a multiple X scale up from that point forward. And yeah, really growing the team has been it's been a fun component of the last year or so here. We've seen a huge growth in the team here and growing our presence internationally as well, which is a great sign of where things are within carbon upcycling.
That's amazing. Congratulations on your growth. And I know it's interesting going into new markets and understanding the culture and the policy and regulation frameworks and all those things. So shout out to you for navigating that simultaneously while driving domestic adoption here at home. You are given 10 to 30 seconds to give some pieces of advice to the next budding entrepreneur in climate and sustainability. What would you tell them?
So as I mentioned before, I think the a key is just prioritizing time and making sure that any program or anything that you're part of is helping you to move forward, and make sure that you are getting the results from that as soon as possible. As always, time and resources are limited for startups. So getting to that next stage, whatever that might look like for the company, needs to be your number one focus. So getting that first customer, getting that seed funding, getting that next commercial project, whatever you can do to hit that mark needs to be the main focus, and work with the folks within your network to help to get to that stage, and don't be afraid to ask questions or ask for help from those folks in your network, because before you know it, you'll be that success story, and you'll be able to help support the next generation of climate tech startups.
It's so incredible to hear about the real impact that organizations like ERA are having on Canadian clean tech companies like Carbon Upcycling Technologies. This work that we all do to accelerate the innovative technologies that are reducing Canada's emissions is so critical in the fight against climate change. In 10 years, Foresight has accomplished so much, We've worked with more than 1,000 companies, created thousands of green jobs, and helped build a pan-Canadian network of clean tech innovators, industry partners, investors, members of government, and academics, all of whom are dedicated to a clean future for Canada and the world. And we're very excited to multiply that impact. Thanks for listening, and thank you to our guests today for sharing their perspectives with us. Don't forget to subscribe to the Cleantech Forward podcast wherever you listen, and to share this episode with your friends and colleagues. I'll see you next time.
To learn more about Foresight's programs, events, and more, visit us at foresightcac.com or follow us on social at Foresight CAC.